You be smart about this. You figure out a plan that works. And you take that trash to the fucking train station.
Yes, sir.
I have been waiting weeks to have the opportunity to do this. I am so very excited. This is the upcoming Knife Standards RR Station in the charcoal variation, as he's calling it, which is going to give you the dark bead blasted titanium, the black DLC hardware and clip, and the lava flow Fatcarbon inlays. Love this knife. Can't say nearly enough good things about it. So this is not going to be a terribly long review because I kind of just gave you the reveal right here at the beginning. But we will break into the TLDW right away. Too long, didn't watch. For those with short attention spans that don't want to hear every little thing about the knife, you just want the highlights, the highs and the lows. Here we go. Pros on the RR Station. The awesome aesthetic design. I love how this knife looks. I think it is sexy as shit. When he posted the sneak peek of his prototype on Instagram, I instantly saw what he was going for. I saw that cool vintage locomotive just sitting there in that picture. I'm like, oh man, I cannot wait to see that in person. And I sent him a message right away. I'm like, dude, I need to review that as soon as you're ready to start passing those around to do reviews on. He's like, absolutely. He goes, it's already going out to Jared. And when Jared gets done, I'll ask him if he can send it to you. So if you want to see the first review of this knife, go over to Neve's Knives. He got a chance to get it first. He got a chance to play with it. And judging by the marks that were all over the blade when I first opened it, he did quite a bit of cutting with it. I don't think he did any cutting in the video from what I recall. But it definitely took me a while to clean the blade, so it was nice enough to photograph. Now, the next thing is the fast, smooth action. Doesn't matter if you use the thumb studs and do a thumb opening, or the thumb stud and do a reverse flick, or grab right into that blade length fuller and reverse flick off of that. For such a large blade, which only has a 3.5 inch cutting edge, the whole thing is just large and massive. It swings out beautifully. I mean, you're going to want to have a little bit of strength in your flicking finger. You don't want to have a super weak finger because it is a big, heavy blade. However, it flicks out with authority. Another thing that I love is the Fatcarbon scales, the lava flow. I am a fan. I have a couple of knives in lava flow myself. I have worked with lava flow in making some knives myself. And it's just a good looking material. It's got a great splash of color to it. It looks fantastic. It finishes very, very well, nice and smooth and clean. Really good choice for this. Now, I know he's going to have a lot of different options. I don't know how many at this point, but this will not be the only option. So if you're not a red fan, don't worry about it. There will be other options available to you. And lastly, on the pros, it's definitely going to be the multiple deployment methods. Like I said, you can use the thumb studs front or rear. You can use that blade length fuller front or rear. And the knife opens perfectly every time. It's not a fidget monster. You're not going to be sitting like you do with an EMP EDC Nimble and 1,000 times an hour closing and opening it. But it feels really satisfying no matter how you choose to open it. So there's all the pros. The cons, it's a big ass knife. It's so big that I think a lot of people are going to look at it and go, there's no way I can EDC that knife. It is far too long. It's a beefy, heavy knife. So it's big and it's heavy. So not the perfect choice for EDC, but for somebody that likes to carry a bigger knife, you're not going to have any issues whatsoever. For those that have been a fan of the Hamachi for a number of years, here you can see them butt to butt. The Hamachi is even bigger, and I know a lot of people that own a Pohanlu Hamachi. I've still got mine all these years later. What's it been? 8, 9 years? I don't know what it's been now. Still one of my favorite knives. And what I love about this is he's got the finger choil in here that everybody wants on my Hamachi. The Hamachi with the finger choil was made by Po just for me, so he's never made it available. It's always been a straight-bodied knife for everybody else. But if you've ever wanted that in a lighter weight knife, then this has the same ergos as my personal Hamachi number 1 does. And you don't have to have a super strong index finger because Po's detents are notoriously hard. So it can be a finger breaker for some people. This you won't have that issue with. The knife glides open and glides closed beautifully. Really, really does. Now, I'm uncertain. Let me move this out of the way. I'm uncertain what this is all about. It looks like he had planned to do one of the paperclip style pocket clips and make it reversible. And that's not the case now. It looks like this might still be reversible. I think you can swap out this hardware here, put the clip over here, use that screw, screw it in there, put this screw on the back to hold the scale on, and I think you're fine. But the 2 notches there tell me he was going to do the old paperclip trick like he did on the RR Standard. Now, I've had my RR Standard for a couple of months now. You'll notice this is not the one that I reviewed. The one I reviewed was a completely different finish. My personal one is all blacked out. I carry it often. I've used it often. It's really a fantastic knife. And I know a lot of people that have gotten theirs and said the exact same thing. They were like, holy shit, that is way nicer than I expected it to be, especially for the money. But just like the RR Standard, it has very neutral ergonomics, very straight body to it. Almost everybody is going to find a high degree of comfort while holding this knife. It doesn't have so many finger choils and notches and bevels and whatnot that lock your hand into a position that's determined by the designer and may not be your preferred position. That happens a lot. I've got one right here. I was going to bring this knife out for an example of how much I love large Wharncliffes. I love this knife, and it works perfectly for my hand. That's great for my index finger, and my other fingers drop naturally into place because I have large hands. But if that were shaped any differently and it were uncomfortable for me, I'd be screwed. There's no neutrality to it. I could put this in 10 people's hands, and 8 people are going to go, holy shit, that feels good. And 2 of them are going to go, I don't like how that feels. It's forcing my hand further up in the handle than I want, or further back, or this swell here doesn't fall between my middle and ring fingers, so it's just not comfortable for me. So that locks you into a predetermined position on the knife, whereas something like this that's very straight, very neutral, it doesn't. It still feels good in the hand, but it's not telling you, hey, put your fingers here or put me in this position in your hand, like so many others might. Just look at that thing, man. Another thing that I love is this is much more proportional, Visually, it's a better visual balance than the standard was. The standard still looks like the blade is too short for the handle. Doesn't bother me. I like the whole look of the knife, especially with as tall as the blade is. It's very beefy looking, and the grinds also help that as well. But this is more visually balanced. And that handle is fitting a hell of a big blade inside. And I know I keep saying that, and then I go back and say, well, the cutting edge is only 3.5 inches. You've still got about a 3.9 inch overall length on the blade. It's a very long blade. You've got a large sharpening notch there. So to take that sharpening choil out, and you'd have another, 1/8 of an inch of cutting edge. But overall length on this, and I'll be discussing that more in the specs portion, it's a big-ass knife, man. 8.72 inches in overall length when it's opened up. That's a lot of knife. Now, for some people, that's a deal killer. They're like, nope, I just don't carry knives that large. Well, a lot of us don't care. And it's funny because I had mentioned that, it's in the cons section of the TLDW, that it's big and heavy. And if all you do is pick up this knife today, you're going to go, that's got some substance to it. That's got some weight. But now that I picked this up right next to it, this is almost featherweight in comparison to my Hamachi. It is a substantial weight difference. This, what is the weight on this? All right, let's get down to the specs, something a lot of you have been waiting for. This is a titanium bolster lock with an overall length of 8.72 inches. Your total blade length is 3.9 inches, but the cutting edge is only 3.5 inches because you're taking out that area for the sharpening choil. So a 3.5 inch cutting edge, perfectly reasonable for most people, but this is an overall very long knife for it to only have a 3.5 inch cutting edge. Blade thickness is 140 thousandths of an inch thick, so it's got some substance to it, but it's not overly thick. And honestly, if this were not hollow ground, they probably would have gone into a slimmer blade, but you've got to have some extra thickness to be able to hollow grind it on both sides this thin and not blow out the middle, and to have room to do this blade length fuller. It is a wonderful hollow grind, by the way, very slicey, very sharp, and the blade material is Vanax Super Clean. The big deal about Vanax is this. It is extraordinarily corrosion resistant. It is almost completely rust proof. And that's hard to say when you're talking about steels. When you're talking about, dendritic cobalt and SM100 and things like that, not being steel, it's easier to understand how it's completely corrosion resistant. This is a steel, and it is completely corrosion resistant. What it does is, instead of being, completely rust proof, what it will do is, if you were to go out on the ocean and you're using this thing in salt water all over the place and you forget to clean it off, what will happen is it will create a microfilm on the top layer of rust, and that will continue to protect the rest of the blade. It won't pit and get all the way into the steel. It creates its own fine layer at the very, very top, and only that will show any rust whatsoever or any corrosion, but it won't make its way all the way through into the steel. It's a really interesting kind of steel. The other great thing is the wear resistance is extraordinarily high. So you're going to have that nice, sharp, clean edge for a good long time before you'll need to strop it, and certainly a lot longer before you'll ever need to start removing material by sharpening it. You're going to get a lot of use out of this. The only thing that isn't utterly amazing about Vanax is the fact that its toughness is not as great as its corrosion resistance and wear resistance. It's pretty well middle of the road. So the good thing about having a high toughness is if you're slicing, let's say you're cutting down some cardboard boxes, you didn't see a staple in there and you hit it. If you have a good, tough edge, then it's less likely to chip. Now, this is not a chippy steel at all. You don't really have to worry about that. But there are other steels that would serve that purpose a little bit better. But I think more people are worried about having a knife in their pocket all day long and sweating on it and rusting the blade, more so than if they're cutting through something and they're worried about chipping the edge. So Vanax is absolutely one of the prestige steels that you can get. And typically, you're not going to find that in a knife in this price range. If you're spending $500, $600, $700, it's a little bit easier to slip the cost of Vanax into that manufacturing. But when you're talking about a knife that's $350 to $375, it's a lot harder to get that steel into this knife in that price and still make it attractive. If this were just a plain Jane frame lock that was stonewashed, sure, that would be easier. But you've got an expensive steel and you've got expensive carbon fiber on here that when you put those two things together, I'm sure it was a bit of a challenge to hit this price point that they wanted to hit. I think you did a fantastic job. And overall, there's really not anything that I would change about the material selections. I believe it is marked Vanax on here somewhere. No, it is not. I thought it was. Pulled this out for the first time, I immediately wanted to sit down and do the video. I was that excited. But I'm like, no, let me spend a few days with it. Let me kind of get to know it a little bit. Let me see what I really like and don't like about it before I just run off and talk about the specs and show the knife. Let's really get to know it. And I have not found a single thing that I don't like about this knife. Not one thing. It's just fantastic. Now, the reason why it's called the RR Station is because a lot of what he designs is in memory of his father. And his father was a collector of various types of model trains and toy trains and things like that. And he kind of grew up around that. And I guess he has a respect for that particular hobby that his father had. So he wanted to design something that really emulated that very, very well without being hokey, without taking the pivot and engraving a friggin' choo-choo on it or some shit. He incorporated this design to really give you that feeling. Like I said, when I saw his very first picture on Instagram of this knife, I was scrolling through pretty fast and that was what I pictured. I saw that and went, oh man, it's like those cool Art Deco trains. I love Art Deco stuff. I'm not really a train fanatic myself. I don't really know much about them. I didn't, it wasn't a hobby that I ever really jumped into. But I think they're cool. And I loved the combination that he did here by bringing that to life. I just thought it was super cool. So I have been excited to have this in the house for the past few days and playing with it and throwing it in the pocket and kind of just carrying it around. I think it's just fantastic. I'm very much eagerly awaiting the time that the pre-order is over, the knives are on the way, and I can just buy one and get one in my collection because I think it's pretty friggin' cool. And if he keeps going on like this, I'm going to end up with a whole damn collection of Knife Standards knives. And as much as I've enjoyed carrying this one and using this one, I think I'm going to feel the exact same about the station as well. And that's pretty awesome. At these prices, it's really awesome. You're not having to spend $500, $600, $800 to get a knife that really excites you. And for me, that's a lot of what it is. There are a ton of knives out there that cost a lot less that will cut every bit as good, maybe not for as long, maybe not heat treated as well, maybe not made of Vanax where it's not going to rust and corrode. But there are plenty of cheap knives out there that cut very, very well. And if that's all you're interested in a knife is simply only its ability to cut, then there's a whole world of options out there for you. I want a knife that excites me by its design, that I love to fidget with, I love to feel the action of, that I love to stare at and go, holy shit, this is a beautiful work of art. And that is absolutely one of those knives that does that for me. It tickles me from the inside. And hopefully it'll tickle you as well. That's it for me, guys. I'm out of here for now, and I'll see you on the next video.